Hey everyone, it's Ms. Spencer. Today we'll be learning how to round whole numbers and decimals. We're going to start by rounding the number 83 to the nearest tens place. I'm going to show you two strategies you can use, and then you can choose the strategy that works best for you. First, we're going to start by plotting 83 on the number line. To do that, we need to label our starting point, ending point, and midpoint for our number line. We're going to do that by knowing that we're rounded to the nearest tens place. So the start of our number line is going to be the number of tens in the number 83. We can look and see that there are 8 tens in the number 83. So the start of our number line is going to be 8 tens, which is the same as 80. So we're going to place 80 at the start of our number line. Now, to figure out what we're going to put at the end of our number line, we're going to add one more 10, since we're rounding to the tens place, to the 8 tens that we have at the start. 8 tens plus one more 10 would be 9 tens, or 90. So the end of our number line is going to be 90. Now we're going to label the midpoint. We know that the middle, or halfway, between 80 and 90 is 85. So the midpoint is going to be 85. Now we need to plot 83 on our number line. We can see that there are 10 even spaces between 80 and 90. That means that each of these tick marks is going to represent 1, since the ones place is to the right of the tens place on the place value chart. So we'll start here at 80, 81, 82, 83. So 83 is going to go right here. Now we can look at our number line and see that this point that represents 83 is much closer to 80 than it is to 90. So that means that 83 is going to round down to 80. Now let's use the other strategy. When we're doing rounding 83 to the nearest tens place, what we're going to do first is underline the tens place so that we know which digit we're going to be focusing on. So I'm going to drag my underlining rectangle under the 8. Now I look to the digit to the right of the 8. The digit to the right would be the 3 in the ones place. So I'm going to drag the arrow so that it's looking at the 3 in the ones place. And now I'm going to circle the 3 so that I know which number I'm looking at. Remember the saying, 4 or less, let it rest, 5 or more, raise the score. Well, 3 ones falls in between 4 or less. That means 8 is going to rest, which means that's going to stay at 8 tens. We can rewrite 8 tens as 80. So 83, when rounded to the nearest tens place, rounds to 80. Let's try the other one. Here we have 1 and 35 hundredths rounded to the nearest tenths. We're first going to use the number line, so we need to create our number line first. We can see here that we're rounding to the tenths place. So in the number 135, there's a 3 in the tenths place, but we also have to remember that 1 is the same as 10 tenths. So we need to add the 10 tenths to the 3 tenths that are in the tenths place. We have a total of 13 tenths in this entire number. So our starting number line is going to be 13 tenths, or 1 and 3 tenths. Since we're rounding to the nearest tenths place, we're going to add one more tenth to the 1 and 3 tenths that we already have. Well, 1 and 3 tenths plus one more tenth would be 1 and 4 tenths. So the end of our number line is going to be 1 and 4 tenths. As a reminder, if there are no hundredths listed, that means that there's just no hundredths. We can represent that with a 0 in the hundredths place. Sometimes this helps people to see that there's a 0 in the hundredths place so that they can help find the midpoint. If this this helps you, then you can add a 0 to the hundredths place, but you don't have to. So now 1 and 3 tenths is the same as 1 and 30 hundredths. 1 and 4 tenths is the same as 1 and 40 hundredths. Halfway between 1 and 30 hundredths and 1 and 40 hundredths is 1 and 35 hundredths. So now we can plot our point to represent 1 and 35 hundredths. Oh, we can see that's actually the midpoint. So we can drag our dot to 1 and 35 hundredths. This is exactly between 1 and 30 hundredths, or 1 and 3 tenths, and 1 and 40 hundredths, or 1 and 4 tenths. When it's exactly in the middle like this, we always round up. So 1 and 35 hundredths, when rounded to the nearest tenths place, is 1 and 4 tenths. Now let's try the procedural method. We can see that we're rounding 1 and 35 hundredths to the nearest tenths place. So what we're going to do is underline the 3 since it's in the tenths place. Now we're going to look to the digit to the right. So I'm going to drag the arrow so that we can see which digit we're looking at, and that would be the 5 in the hundredths place. So I'm going to circle the 5 in the hundredths place so I know which number to focus on. So remember, 4 or less, let it rest. 5 or more, raise the score. Well, 5 hundredths falls in the category of 5 or more, raise the score. So that means that 3 tenths is going to raise up to 4 tenths. And we need to remember to include everything to the left. So 1 and 35 hundredths, when rounded to the nearest tenths, is 1 and 4 tenths. Let's try one more like this. Here we have 24 and 8 tenths, and we're rounding this to the nearest whole number. Whole number is the same as the ones place. So I'm going to look at the number at 24 and 8 tenths, and we can see that there are 4 ones in this number. But remember, there's 4 ones, but there's also 2 tens in this number. 2 tens is the same as 20 ones. So we have 20 ones plus 4 ones here. That's 24 ones. So at the start of our number line, we're going to put 24. Since we're rounding to the nearest whole number, or ones place, we're going to add one more to 24. 24 plus 1 is 25. So we're going to put 25 at the end of our number line. Halfway between 24 and 25 is 24 and 5 tenths. Now that we have all our starting, midpoint, and ending point on our number line, we can plot 24 and 8 tenths. Since we're rounded to the nearest whole number, where the ones place, we know that each of these tick marks is going to represent 1/10, since the tenth is to the right of the ones place. So here we have 24, 24 and 1/10, 24 and 2/10, 24 and 3/10, 24 and 4/10, 24 and 5/10, 24 and 6/10, 24 and 7/10, 24 and 8/10. And a plotter point right here. We can see that 24 and 8/10 is much closer to 25 than it is to 24. So 24 and 8/10, when rounded to the nearest whole number, is 25. Now let's try the procedural method. We have 24 and 8/10. We're rounding to the nearest whole number. So we're going to underline the whole number, or the ones place. So I'm going to underline the 4 since that's in the ones place. Now we look to the right of the ones place. So I'm going to drag the arrow so we can see where we're looking at. Oh, so we're going to look at the 8 in the tenths place since that's the digit to the right. Remember the saying, 4 or less, let it rest. 5 or more, raise the score. So 8 falls in the category of 5 or more. So that means 24 is going to round up to 25. Finally, we're going to figure out what the minimum or the smallest number is that will round up to 2, and the maximum or the largest number that will round down to 2. So on our number line, we can see we put 2 in the center because we're trying to find a number that's the smallest that will still round up to 2, and a number that's the biggest that's going to round down to 2. So what we'll do is, since the 2 is in the ones place, we're going to make our starting point 1 less than 2 and our ending point 1 more than 2. Well, 1 less than 2 would be 1, and 1 more than 2 would be 3. So now we have our starting point and our ending point. Now let's label the midpoints. Halfway between 1 and 2 is 1 and 5/10. Halfway between 2 and 3 is 2 and 5/10. Let's start by finding the smallest number that will round up to 2. Well, if we look at our midpoint, that's always a good place to start. We know that 1 and 5/10, because the 5 in the tens place falls into the category of 5 or more, it's going to make our number round up to 2. If we want even 1/10 less, like 1 and 4/10, I'll just label this here so we can take a look. Well, now there's a 4 in the tens place. The 4 falls in the category of 4 or less. So 1 and 4/10 is actually closer to 1. So this 1 and 4/10 would round down to 1. So the smallest number that can round up to 2 would be 1 and 5/10. So our minimum, also known as the smallest number that will round up to 2, is 1 and 5/10. Finally, let's find the maximum, or the largest number that will round down to 2. Our midpoint between 2 and 3 is 2 and 5/10. Well, if you look in the tens place, there's a 5. The 5/10 falls into the category of 5 or more. So 2 and 5/10, even though it's exactly with the between 2 and 3, would round up to 3. So what we can do is look at 1/10 less. Instead of 2 and 5/10, let's look at 2 and 4/10. So now there's a 4 in the tenths place. Well, 4/10 falls into the category of 4 or less. So that means that 4 or less would make the number rest or go down to 2. 2 or 4/10 would run down to 2. So the minimum, or the smallest number that's going to round up to 2, is 1 and 5/10. The maximum, or the biggest number, is going to be 2 and 4/10.